Hi everyone, Enrique here from Maven Analytics. We have a brand new course for you on natural language processing, and today I'll be chatting with instructor Zhao about the evolution of NLP, how to use LLMs for data analysis, and what's next for NLP. Hi Alice.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm good. I'm so glad this course is out to the world.
I am too. I know we always say it, but it's worth having to say it every single time. It's so much effort goes into these courses and like just working so closely with you, like I realize how much effort you put into it. And I think it just makes it that much sweeter when these go out. And I think it just, for me, it amps up the excitement for people to actually take this course because I got kind of like a behind the scenes view of the course curriculum and how you're building it and how you're going to teach it. And I think people are really going to love it. And it's very relevant.
Yeah, I think that's the main takeaway I want from this discussion that we're going to have is just that NLP, it's evolved so much and you just need a modern course for it. And I feel like this course really captures what's going on today. So I don't want to get ahead of myself here, but that's really the takeaway.
Well, let's start simple, right? Natural language processing, big words, NLP,
Yep.
right? What is NLP for anyone that's watching that has maybe never even heard about the topic or has but didn't realize it?
So I would say very simply, it's just working with text data. So as a data scientist or analyst, you're working with numeric data all the time. The NLP is working with text data. And if you break down that word, natural language processing, the natural language just means languages that you use to speak to people, like Spanish, English, Chinese. But then the processing part is like what a computer does. So yeah, it's just working with text data. That's all.
I love how simple that sounds, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, in practice it can be. It's funny because I feel like in every other course that we probably have as Maven, it's all about you learning how to speak the computer's language so you can get it to do what you want. And here it's how to get the computer to speak your language so you can still get it to do what you want. So I think that's quite a,
I love
you
that
know,
way of describing it. That's such a good way to do it. Yeah, and I think right now with all the new AI technologies and methodologies that have come out, like the computers are able to speak our language now. So that's pretty cool.
it's pretty fascinating. Yeah. So you talk about modern NLP, right? And how it's very relevant. Like this course is very relevant today because of all the changes. So I'm sure you've kind of had pretty comprehensive journey from learning it the first time and maybe without these techniques and now having to, incorporate those into the way that you use NLP uh, for the same tasks maybe, but using different techniques. So tell us a little bit more about the NLP journey that you've gone through.
It's been a really long one. I took my first NLP class. It was called Text Analytics at the time. It was in 2013, so over a decade ago, and it was so different. I remember what we learned at the time was here's a sentence, break it down into different words. Now look at the word frequencies. And it was like a whole quarter, and then we built up to that near the end. And that was again 2013. And from 2013 to like 2017, 2018, I was working for a company where I was doing data science work, and they allowed me to have a passion quarter where I could learn anything I wanted to.
Wow.
And I remember when I took that text pre-processing class or text analytics is what it was called, text analytics class earlier in my master's program. I was like, wow, NLP has evolved so much. Let me spend a quarter just learning about NLP. And so yeah, I created this whole conference talk on learning about NLP and Python, and so much had evolved in those like 5 years.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, I'm so up to date. This is great. And then a year later, a new architecture came out. And a few years later, like something new came out. And then when I was asked to create this NLP course, it had been another, what, 7 years since my conference talk. And I was like, oh my God, things have just changed even more. And this course actually took me like 6 months to prepare for because things had just changed so much. Like within
Yeah.
this NLP course, the first half is stuff that has been around since 10 years ago, but then there's just so much new stuff happening. And ugh, I don't know how to say this succinctly, but basically in 10 years, all these models have come along, and then some of them have become outdated within years. It's
Yeah.
crazy. So things like when I gave my conference talk, maybe like 7 years ago, everyone's like, let's learn about LSTMs. They're state of the art. And I was like, okay, I'm going to learn about these. And then for this course, it's like, don't learn about those. Those are already out
Yep.
of date, and you should be learning about transformers and attention. So, yeah, the evolution is just wild. I think it's one of the things that's evolved like by far the quickest over the past decade.
Yeah, and I think so far we've mentioned these terms like, what is NLP? Now you're starting to talk about models and LSTMs and transformers and attention. And I think maybe so far people haven't realized that they're already seeing these models in their everyday life uh, when they open up ChatGPT and start talking to it in human language, right? So can you talk? I know you've kind of talked about your evolution with NLP, maybe all of that starting in 2013. How about just in general the evolution of NLP up to now these new, very public facing, very popular models. Like I suppose ChatGPT isn't the actual name of the model, but yeah, maybe just
Yeah.
add a little bit more color around all that.
No, that's really actually really interesting because you're right. Like people, they've already been exposed to it and they might think, oh, this like through ChatGPT, and they might think like, oh, this is like something new, but it's been around for a really long time. It's just that now it works so well and it's very accessible to the public. But yeah, in the course I talk about the history of NLP and how I split it into three sections, different eras. And the first era is the early NLP phase, which started in the 1950s. Like people are trying to
Well,
do machine translation then. And the very interesting part is they actually thought it was an easy task. They were like, "Oh yeah, we have computers now. Like
yeah,
let's do a translation." But then it was really hard. And so then um that moves us to like traditional NLP. So like early NLP was like really basic. Everything is rules based. Like if you see this word, translate it into this word. And then the traditional era is more in the 19 like 90s and 2000s. That's when I first started learning about all this. Um, that's when you get into statistical analysis, machine learning, and everything we go through in the data science course. So supervised and unsupervised learning, classification, clustering, things like that. And that at the time was really like groundbreaking, right?
yeah,
And then the modern era, it's the last 10 years, it's so new. And this is where you get all the large language models or LLMs, ChatGPT. People talk about the attention paper from 2017. And it's just now for the first time, it's very human-like. So you have the early NLP, which is just rules, the traditional NLP, which is more still pretty impressive. Like you're using
yeah.
machine learning to like have a computer learn language like a human, but now it's just like the human-like era. And it's amazing how this works. Like
It
Enrique,
really
you and I
is.
talked about this when we were developing the course together. If you go to the building blocks of NLP or the modern NLP stuff, it's just it's just neural networks. And once you understand how a neural network works, everything is based off of that. And it's amazing that these models work so well.
Yeah. Then now that you kind of touched on that subject of neural networks and how suppose at its most basic, like the structure, and when you talk about things like architectures as well, but the structure of scary word like neural network, it's almost as simple as input, apply a logistic regression or transformation, and then have an output, which is your prediction. And obviously, as you make it a network and you start increasing the number of transformations you apply, and you go through all these different nodes, which start to mirror the way our brain works, it becomes very black boxish
Yep.
very fast. And I think one of the key takeaways as I was helping with this course was that so far during this data science with Python series, which this would be course 5 of, a lot of it has been be careful with the danger zone. Just because it's so easy now to apply these models using Python doesn't mean that it should just be plug and play. Because if you don't understand like how to interpret the outputs properly, then you run the risk of making poor decisions based on the fact that, yeah, I mean, I applied a machine learning model, right? It should be like good to go. But here, it's actually now because these models are so incredible, to say the least, like it's accepted to just accept the fact that, yeah, it's a black box model and that's okay, and just go with it. So can you, I mean, I guess shed a little bit more light into that, because again, I think you mentioned the words, it's a big mindset shift
Yeah.
for data scientists, right?
And that was something that I realized as I was creating the course because I've created a lot of courses over the past decade, and I always start with that Venn diagram that's like, here's the math you need to know, here's like domain expertise, and you need to have both. And if you don't know the
Yeah,
math, you're in the danger zone. Like, don't fall into that. I've started that with every course. And for this course, as I was developing it, I was like, okay, I have to fully understand everything that's happening because, like I say to my students, like, fully understand everything. And then I fully understood, like, I want to say like 80% of it. And I'm like, that last 20%, people just don't know. You know what I mean? Like, the
yeah,
last 20%, the researchers understand, but then you have like the additional last 5% of like what's actually going on. People just don't know. And that's completely wild to me these days. And so that
yeah,
like, I developed that mindset shift as I was working with this. And I realized I don't need to know everything. Like, if I don't need to know everything and I'm teaching it, like, especially if you're applying it, you don't need to know
yeah,
everything. That said, I still think it's important to understand the basic theory. So, like,
yeah,
understand how a neural network works, which we go through in the course. Like, it is that you have a weighted sum followed by some type of transformation, and that's it. You just do that over and over again. And also, like, the different categories of large language models. I think that's so important because like when I was introduced to all these LLMs, I was like, "Ugh, there's a new one coming out every week. What do I need to learn?" And then I realized it's just three basic categories. And once you understand that, everything feels a lot more accessible. So, yes, there's this mindset shift. Like you don't need to understand everything, but I do think it's still good to know or important to know the basics, especially if you're applying them in your code.
yeah. I especially for me, I remember it was sort of this also like light bulb moment where before, like, okay, you're training this data set, well, when you're applying, supervised, unsupervised, like you need the machine to learn, right? You're applying machine learning based on the data that you have, and because it can vary, like that's where the domain expertise comes in. That's why you need to perform like proper EDA, know exactly what you want, so you know what technique to use. But here, what we started this conversation saying, hey, this is about computer learning how humans speak. So if the model has already achieved that, like to a near perfect degree, like yeah, what's there to fine tune or tweak, right? Like the computer can now speak like a language, so just use it for whatever application, comes out of the box with this model. That was kind of a little bit wild to me, and super cool that it did it by mirroring brains, which is kind of insane. But
No, I feel like we could have a very long conversation about this because I'm just yes, like I'm totally wowed by how well these models are performing. And as you were saying that, it just made me think of one more thing, which is I mentioned this in the course, and I came to it as I was teaching the course, but um, like if you use Python, you know the base Python language, right? But then you can import all these libraries, and they allow you to use pandas, so you can do data analysis, allows you to import scikit-learn so you can do machine learning, right? And these days we have that, but for models. Like that's what
yeah,
Hugging Face's Model Hub does for us. Instead of just importing a library so that you can do machine learning, you import a model that allows you to do sentiment analysis specifically like for social media data. You know what I mean? It's already been fine-tuned
yeah,
for you. And they're just I think when I first started the course, there was just over 100 million, or sorry, 1 million models available. And then at the end, when I was recording, it was like 1.5 million. And it's
wow,
just like there's so many pre-trained models out there that have been fine-tuned by people, whether they're companies or individuals, and you just import it for your project. And so people have already been doing kind of the heavy lifting, and then
yeah,
your job is to make it applicable to your company. And yes, you could do additional fine tuning, but you're going to get 80% of the way there just by using something you download. So, yeah, it's amazing. It's an amazing
incredible.
time we live in.
Yeah. So you mentioned we're going to cover how neural networks are trained, that we're going to be using Hugging Face to import these models. Do you want to just talk a little bit more just about what's covered in this course as part of the curriculum?
Sure. So, this course, we start by going over the history of NLP. So, it's like NLP 101, how it's evolved, because I just think it's really important and it's just evolved in such a short time. It's amazing. And we just talk about how with the addition of these fancy mathematical architectures as well as computational power, like moving from
Yep.
CPUs to GPUs. That's really caused this big change. So first about the history, and then the course is split into two parts. There's a traditional and a modern part. The traditional part is what you would know as a data scientist. So how to clean your data, how to model it using supervised and unsupervised learning techniques. That's the first part. And then the second part is the modern piece. So we start with theory. It's not intimidating though. Enrique and I made it very,
Yeah.
very visually it's very visual and it's
Yeah.
hopefully easy to understand. But we talk about how a neural network works from the very basics. And then we build that up to deep learning. And then we build that up to something called the transformer, which is what's behind ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, like all these things. And then once you understand that theory, then we dive into the practical piece. So how do you do this in Python using something called Hugging Face? It sounds intimidating, but it's like really
Yeah.
straightforward to use. And then we go through all these practical examples. Um, my favorite was something called zero shot classification, which was mind blowing to me as a data scientist because as a data scientist, you always need labeled data if you're doing classification.
Yeah.
With zero shot classification, you can classify your text into categories without labeled data. It's amazing.
Fascinating.
It's just amazing. Yeah. And then I wrap up the whole thing by talking about this mindset shift because, yeah, we're entering this new era.
I love it. And now that you kind of talked about your favorite application, and as you talk about what's covered in the course, it's like the things that you're going to learn. But how about like what are some of the other NLP applications? Because yeah, we've talked. So yeah, NLP is all about using computers to work with text data. So what are the typical things that you'd want to do? You talk about your text analysis course. So what are some of the other applications that they're going to be like students are going to be able to, yes, apply after going through this course, like zero shot classification?
So the most popular one is sentiment analysis. Whenever you hear people talk about text, it's like sentiment
Yeah,
analysis. And that's actually a really cool one in the course because we go through that using a traditional technique as well as a modern technique. So using rules versus using LLMs. And in some cases, one works better than the other. So it's really showing you it's not all about the models, it's about your interpretation. So sentiment analysis is a popular one, text summarization, trying to think of some examples. Oh, there's one called named entity recognition where
yeah,
there's this exercise where you have all these book descriptions and then you can extract the characters from the book descriptions. So cool. Or the other example we go through is you have all this reviews data and then you can extract the competitors from the reviews. Just like stuff we could not do with
yeah.
traditional machine learning before that we can now do. So there ends up just being a lot of practical things. Yeah.
I love it. So we talked about the evolution, how it's kind of just really ramped up recently. Um, what's next for NLP? Is there a next frontier, or are we kind of capped out? Or is it even possible to know?
That's a really good question. And I would say, I don't think we're capped out. I think there's so much more coming. Like right now, these models, they work like ChatGPT and so on. They work really well and they're just getting better all the time because they're training these larger models with billions of parameters, which in the course we'll talk more about what that actually means. It's mind
Yeah,
blowing. But I think these models are going to get better. And then also, I think we're all going to learn how to integrate it into our workflow better
yeah,
because I would say even building this course and using AI to learn was just a different experience and I felt like I was able to learn faster. I was able to make sure I was thinking about things in the right way and I just think it's going to change the way we learn about things. And I think in a good way. Like I think as long as in terms of learning with AI and NLP, I think as long as you start by really understanding the basics and then you use it to help you fine tune your knowledge, like that will be helpful. In other spaces, I think NLP, like text data, will be combined with like video and audio and all those will come together. That's already starting with some of these multimodal approaches.
yeah.
But yeah, I think this is just the beginning. Our world's gonna be
Exciting.
different in a decade.
Yeah, we'll be looking for part two.
Oh man, I just feel like this it keeps getting refreshed. Yeah,
I know.
every decade it's gonna be different.
But I mean, hopefully this has done a lot to get people excited to learn about this course. So where can they find it?
Yep. So the natural language processing in Python course is available at Maven Analytics on our platform, or you can also find it on Udemy. And yeah, it's I think it's one of my favorite courses that I've ever created. So I've created a lot of them, but this one, it's just it's like traditional and modern, and we try to do it in a practical way and understandable. So these terms, well, I'll say one more thing. These terms sound so intimidating, but like if you take in any of our other courses, we always try to break it down into simpler concepts. So if the terms sound confusing, don't worry. We break it down, and by the end, you're like, wow, I can have a conversation about this. And that's our goal.
Yeah, I love it. All right. Well, thanks for your time, Alice. It's a pleasure working on this course with you, and I'm sure everyone that takes it will absolutely love it.